Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, as well as, of course, Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. That's right. We're worldwide. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. You can't get away from us. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the big radio show for today, which is Thursday. Thursday, man. Oh, the week's just clickety-clacking by like a freight train. Here we are on Thursday, getting ready to do our thing and to jump in and talk about stuff that's going on in the legislature. What are we, 80 days now? 80 days into the legislative session. And I feel some frustration, and I'm sure it's probably come out in the last few days on the program. But this frustration of continuing, and this is what I always warn you about, right? Don't get weary in well-doing. And I feel like I'm tired, man. The same things that we have been talking about for so long, and these things are coming to pass. And while there is some vindication in feeling like I told you so, as we've talked about in the last couple of days, it never feels as good to say I told you so when you are suffering the same fate as the people that you were warning, right? And this is the problem. Now, we expect some of this. We expect some of the repeat. Rick in the chat room just said, I told you so. He said, I told you 2 months ago it would be the same old, same old. And we know that it is. But now there's, some eyes are starting to open and people are starting to figure it out that there's not the same freedom that a lot of these legislators have had in the past to just kind of ramrod stuff through and pay for what they want to pay for. And then there's a lot of kind of mealy mouth stuff going on. And this presser, which happened on Tuesday morning. Let me just double check. I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday. It happened at noon 30 on Tuesday. The majority got up there, and it was Chuck Kopp and Danny Josephson and Bryce Edgmond and Louise Stutz, and they all got up there and basically said, this is all the minorities' fault. If they would just come together with us and they would just, we could do something if they would just play ball, if they would just cooperate with us. And of course, the irony of this whole thing is that the minority attempted to have some of their say on some of these things, and yet the majority cut them out until the very end. And then when they realized that they had a 21-19 majority, where any one person could veto what they've got going on, and they don't dare take this thing to the floor for a vote right now, because they know that people like Nellie Jimmy will vote for a full PFD. She voted for a full PFD in the committee, and her comment, and I've in all the stories that I've been reading since yesterday, because I was kind of preparing for this since yesterday, and now I can't find the quote, But basically, she said, I'm voting for a full PFD because this is what my people need. This is what my people need. So we're going to kind of go through this here in the first hour of the program, and we're gonna go through it in their own words, because I've got the full rundown here. We played one little bit yesterday, but today we're going to give you some deeper dives, and there were some good questions by some of the news media, but without the lack of follow-ups in some of these things, but I mean, there were some good questions in here, and we're gonna talk about this. They contradicted themselves within the same presser. At one point, Andy Josephson said, "You don't see us, advocating for a bunch of new taxes." And then later on, he goes on to talk about the oil, the new S corp tax, and he goes on to talk about the new online internet tax. He doesn't mention Elise Galvin's attempt to, it's like the selective memory is strong on this. So we're gonna talk about this here in hour one and go through all these things. We're also going to talk about some of the cuts that are being made not by the state, but by President Trump's Doge team, and what the effect is, especially when it comes to things. And to me, this was such another eye-opening. I mean, I know how bad kind of this bureaucratic ecosystem is, right? Where there's a NGO, there's a government and an NGO organizational kind of ecosphere where they cycle through each other, right? You go from a government organization to an NGO and back to a government organization, and sometimes you're involved in both and things like that. And we see that time and time and time and time again. And this is just another, to me, really brought this to light with some of these cuts from Doge and everything else that we're talking about. So we're going to discuss that as well. In hour two, we're going to be visited by David Boyle, who is the education who's the education advocate and who has been writing for Must Read Alaska, and he has got an article out talking about the true numbers, because part of the problem that we've seen, of course, in the past is that the education industry is basically telling lies about, and the worst part is that they're lies that are baked into half truths. So they're partially true, but they're not really true, right? And so you get this lie that has just enough truth to be able for them to be able to stand away from it and go, "Oh yeah, no, it's totally true. See, this is while at the same time, basically implying something totally different. And the pupil teacher ratio is one of the things that they've been standing behind, and it's one of the things that they're working on right now, where they want to bake that into not only the school formula, the funding and everything else, but they're trying to bake it into a lot of the teacher contracts as well, where the teachers are only supposed to have a set number of students, and anything over that is going to be, they're going to get paid more. And it's just, it's interesting to say the least. So we're going to talk with David Boyle about that in hour two. He's got an article that was published day before yesterday in Must Read Alaska, where he dives down into the actual numbers that are being reported by the districts to the state as per required per state law. And it's going to be interesting. So we'll get into. I just looked at one of the comments on this article that David had written, and the head comment says fake news. All right, we'll ask him about that comment. He goes, fake news, because we got disability programs and everything else. Look at regular. Anyway, we'll get into this. We'll get into this. And we'll dive a little deeper here. Okay, how about that? We'll dive in and start talking about those things as well. I guess we should, just looking at the time here, I guess we'll start off with the cuts from President Trump, because we're going to spend some time on this presser and some of the audio there. But I saw this headline and then I'm like, okay, what does it mean? And then my other question was, well, what exactly? So it's a story in KTUU from a couple days ago, Monday, I think. And it says the Alaska Humanities Forum is one of the latest organizations feeling the federal funding cuts that DOGE has targeted. They received a letter in early April from the National Endowment for the Humanities informing them that their federal grants had been terminated. And it goes on to, with the verbiage of the letter and here's why and everything else. The National Endowment for the Humanities, does anybody know what the National Endowment for the Humanities does? I'm asking for a friend. Anybody in the chat room before I give you the answer, anybody want to tell me what the National Endowment for the Humanities does? And why do we spend I'm looking for the number, 2 point something million dollars a year? Does anybody? $2.8 million a year. All of it, nearly all of it from federal grants matched by grants from the state. So does anybody want to tell me what the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Alaska Humanities Forum, which is the Alaska branch of it, does anybody want to tell me what they do? Anybody? Now, maybe it's not for us. Maybe we're not in the circle of people who need the use of but what is it? The goal of the humanities, both the National Endowment and the Alaska branch, which was formed in 1972, has a mission goal to strengthen communities across Alaska. That's what they're supposed to do. The president of the Alaska Humanities Forum, Cameron Perez Viridia, well, you probably should recognize that name, says the work is as broad as serving urban and rural communities. We are the grantor, so we grant out small grants to organizations and projects all over the state, historical projects, cultural projects, things like language preservations and people telling the story of their community. What else do they do? They have something called StoryWorks that helps support mental health in students. They also help to fund films, helping Alaska filmmakers to tell their story. They're a clearinghouse for giving away federal money for things that they decide are appropriate. And they have got they've got different things that they've done. 28 years of cross-sector leadership development. 24 years of youth cultural exchange programs. Writers and filmmakers programs. Governor's Arts and Humanities, co-hosted with the governor's office since 1968. Vital grants to local community organizations. They argue that they match every dollar of federal funding. They leverage that to raise at least $1.50 in additional investment for every dollar they support. Some of it comes from the state, and maybe they've got some private people that do it as well. But what exactly are when the news stories can't even adequately describe the exact things that they're doing, other than they've been spending nearly $3 million a year in government money to tell stories, to make films, to create leadership conferences, and that Cameron Perez Viridia, for those of you who don't recognize that name, who is also on the Anchorage Assembly making policy to also create grants for who's being paid $180,000-$200,000 a year to be the head of this. And what wasn't Meg Zalatel? Wasn't she making a couple $100,000 to be the homeless coordinator and then granting money to the thing? And I mean, this is the whole self-licking ice cream cone of people working for one sector of the government and then representing it in another. And what exactly does the Alaska Humanities Forum, or at the national level, the National Endowment for the Humanities, what exactly do they do? 75% of the 2.8 million is used for salary, says Frank. If you check their tax forms, I haven't seen it. I haven't looked at the tax forms, but it wouldn't surprise me. And so, I mean, what exactly are jobs programs? Jobs programs. That's what it's become. Organizations whose sole job is to pass out the government money that they're raising from other government organizations to then fully fund whatever it was that they decide is important. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. They're going to get cut, as they should, in my opinion. When nobody seems to know, and I've asked a couple people in the last couple days since this story came out, because I was curious. Do you know what the Alaska Humanities Forum does? Do you know what the National Endowment for the Humanities? Do you know what they do? No. Oh, okay. I mean, no, they have no idea. When you've got an organization, millions of dollars, with employees making a couple $100,000 a year to administer them, and nobody really seems to know what's going on with it, and even the newspaper articles cannot really adequately explain why they are necessary agencies. I mean, in the ADN, again, no right-leaning organization, or KTUU, when they can't explain really what they do in a meaningful way, that's a problem. It's anyway, we got to go. I'm running late. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
What is that?
Common sense.
Regularly heard on American radio.
Michael Duke Show.
Radio.
I don't know if you can hear the frustration in my voice, or the frustration. Yeah. I just don't even. I mean, maybe you guys can. Let me just drop the links. There's two different stories. I don't think the ADN actually did a story on it. It was KTUU, Alaska source. Mustery did an article on it. I didn't see a story in the ADN. I don't think about it. But I find it ironic how many times people who are now in government, running government, and I'm talking about, in this example, assembly members in Anchorage, who are then tied back to the governmental industrial complex, where they are then running other programs that are funded in part by government. In some cases, in Zalatel's case, the same government that's funding her organization. Oh, there's some conflict of interest in there, I would think. But you know what I mean? I mean, This is part of the problem. You got people who are working together in various areas to try and grow the size and scope of government who are also living off of that same size and scope of government. We're seeing some of that in the legislature in regards to this whole school funding thing. You know, where they've got friends and relatives and everything else. There's no conflict because she means well, says Brian. There's no conflict because she means well. There's a frontiersman. Republicans speak out about state budget. Let's see. Speak out about state budget. All right, let me see what they say here. I don't think I don't have a subscription to I don't have a subscription to the Frontiersman, so it won't even let me. It doesn't even give me a preview. It just locks me out. Sucker. You can't have anything. Okay, all right. Anyway, there's the link article if you guys want to go take a look at it. All right. How do you think they get rich on our money? How do you think they get rich on our money? Says Tim. Yeah, I mean that's. But I guess you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Tim. But that's the thing. This is the same group of people who are deciding where to send all this federal money to make. I'm not saying that, these movies or the what was the other thing that they did that sounded it was the teen youth mental health support in schools. I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. But is it this the best way to do it? Is this the best organization? The programming at the Humanity Forum includes leadership anchorage, story works, and kindling conversations, along with individual programs that help Alaskans tell stories that impact Alaskans. More than 450 alumni, hundreds of mentors, and community projects over years have participated in the program. Each one of them are assigned to a project that is community-based, project per project, and every one of them has a mentor as well. So it's a fantastic program. Did that make any sense to you? Did that in any way, any of that? The fantastic program that really helps people prepare to become effective leaders. And I better get off this. Because this is just making me want to smack somebody. All right. Kindling conversations. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. I mean, we know that I'm a knuckle-dragging, troglodyte, right? So I probably just don't understand how important these organizations are to the community because I just don't care. I'm sure that's probably what's going on. I'm sure that's exactly what's happening here. All right, let's get into this with this presser. All right, this presser from Tuesday with the Alaska House Majority, where they are coming in and basically saying, you guys, the minorities just doesn't want to help us. They just don't want to help us. They want to, if they would just come on and help, we could get this done. Of course, they neglected I'm not even going to get into it. Let's get the first two cuts that I had heard that made me then dive down into this 29-minute presser where I pulled a bunch of stuff out, some of the things that were kind of the most egregious and And I want to. There's going to be commentary all morning this morning on this stuff, right? And it's going to be in their own words. We're going to talk about it. But first things first, let's talk about Representative Chuck Kopp, who basically, and from what I'm hearing, is that he tells a bit of a fib in here. This is what I'm hearing, that he didn't, well, we'll get into it, but this is Representative Chuck Kopp yesterday being all self-righteous, and I'm gonna let it speak for itself. But here's Chuck Kopp a couple days ago talking about how he knows better than us when it comes to the PFD and everything else, that he knows better than us. This is Chuck Kopp from the presser.
I ran and campaigned on a balanced budget. I am with a caucus that was committed to sticking with a balanced budget. I met with the now House Minority and asked, how many of you can support a balanced budget, a reduced dividend, paying the dividend we can afford?
But did you really, Chuck? Did you really meet with there's some confusion on that.
If the answer would have been different, I would have been in a different caucus. Because when you are living to pay a full statutory PFD, you will live to pay taxes.
That's only true. That's only true if the legislature cannot live within its means. He's making the classic trade the dividend for the tax argument. And that is the classic argument. It does not allow them, or they do not allow themselves to be drawn into a conversation about, well, if we lived within our means and paid for the dividend outside the budget like we've always done, there'd still be money. But that's not how they see it now. Now it's government money.
That's what's going to drive the question of tax policy. I'm in a caucus that you don't see revenue bills coming out of.
Okay. So this is the comment that I was saying earlier. I'm in a caucus that you don't see revenue bills coming out of, except for modifications to the online tax bills. Elise Galvin's bill. They've got some other oil tax. Zach Fields has talked about putting together. So of course they're not talking about taxes, right?
I'm in a caucus that you don't see revenue bills coming out of, and you don't see a full statutory PFD coming out of.
Except for we did see a full statutory PFD. Andy Josephson was in charge of the budget, and he left the full statutory PFD in the committee substitute that they then passed, leading to this problem.
It is a crisis. We cannot pay an unsustainable dividend, and that dividend distorts the fiscal reality that we're facing.
It distorts the fiscal. No, what it does is that it uncovers the fiscal argument, the fiscal problem that you're creating. It shows that the emperor has no clothes, right? You guys have been spending it, and you want to spend it all. That's the thing. You want to spend it all.
We cannot pay an unsustainable dividend, and that dividend distorts the fiscal reality that we're facing. Do we need new revenue, or do we need to get a handle on the size of the dividend we're paying and honestly figure out how we're going to prioritize that?
Okay, so you notice how he's phrased this. And again, this is Representative Chuck Kopp. Do we need to get new revenue, or do we need to get a handle on the size of the dividend?
Do we need new revenue, or do we need to get a handle on the size of the dividend we're paying? And
so it's not about government spending. See, he shifted the argument from, do we need new revenue, or is it a spending problem? You are the problem because you're demanding a full PFD. You are the problem. because you're demanding a PFD. At no place along this line is there any self-reflection on any of this.
Do we need new revenue, or do we need to get a handle on the size of the dividend we're paying and honestly figure out how we're going to prioritize that? You kind of know where I'm at. We have to prioritize our expenditures so that Alaska is attractive, easy on the eye, and good for business.
Okay, so that Alaska is attractive, easy on. This is the first time that anybody's mentioned the private economy. Or is he talking about the private economy? Is he talking about juicy government contracts that allow businesses to come up here to Alaska? I mean, it could be read either way, but that's the first time they've ever talked about we got to make Alaska look attractive to people.
We have to prioritize our expenditures so that Alaska is attractive, easy on the eye, and good for business, orderly. We have our priorities are in order. We're funding education, public safety, transportation, infrastructure, and we're safe. We're a safe state to live. We need a House minority that's willing to step up, take some very hard votes, and agree that you can't duck the question on the size of the dividend.
Okay. We need a House. You got to listen to that again.
We need a House minority that's willing to step up, take some very hard votes, and agree that you.
We need a House minority that's willing to step up, take some very hard votes, and agree with us. That's what he's saying. And agree. Because we can't do it ourselves. You need to agree.
We need a House minority that's willing to step up, take some very hard votes, and agree that you can't duck the question on the size of the dividend. It's like rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic when you're going down. The problem is we have to address the biggest structural deficit in the budget, and that is trying to be committed to paying a full statutory PFD when it is impossible. Our permanent fund.
When it is impossible. When it is impossible. He goes on to talk about how the permanent fund is, we'll overrun the permanent fund. We won't have any money to draw from it. And it'll be dogs and cats living together business. They're the ones that brought the full PFD to you know what? Take it to the floor. Take it to the floor. See what happens. Fool around and find out, my friends. And then Andy Josephson gets up there, and we have a lot to say about Andy Josephson, who is the finance co-chair, who is the architect of this accidental PFD and this hot mess. We're gonna, oh man. So then Andy Josephson sounds off about all of his, how we just have to cooperate and we just gotta, man, sometimes the smarminess this is going to be tough for me.
Why there are people who still cling to this vision that we can pay a multi-billion-dollar dividend is beyond me.
Because you're an idiot. I mean, I'm just going to say it right out because nobody else will. Why is it? Because people believe that is their money, not yours, not you as a politician. That no, you don't know how to spend their money better. That's why they're clinging to it. And they're clinging to it, hoping that if they pay a full statutory PFD, it will take more money away from you guys, so you will be forced in a de facto spending cap to spend less on government. But it's just beyond him. It's just beyond me. It's just, I just can't fathom it.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me. I just don't fathom it.
He may be the new Natasha. He may be the soundbite machine. We'll see.
Why there are people who still cling to this vision that we can pay a multi-billion-dollar dividend is beyond me. I'm troubled by it. And I respect that people have a position about how this is the Alaska people's share. I get all that. I've read the editorials. There are some legal arguments there.
There are some legal arguments there. Yes, there are some legal arguments there. It's not your money. I mean, it's pretty clear if you go back and read what. But I mean, I understand your opinion. There are some legal arguments there, but
But I think that we need the cooperation of the minority This is their budget too. We haven't had that participation.
This is their budget too? Kevin, how many amendments did you guys try to offer on the budget? How many, wasn't it like 80, is it 96? Was it 96 amendments that you guys tried to offer on the budget? And they said, no soup for you, right? I mean, on almost all of them? Or I mean, wait, what, were you able to get one or two passed? I mean, but this is your budget too. Is it? Is it your budget? I mean, what?
But I think that we need the cooperation of the minority. This is their budget too. We haven't had that participation. Instead, they seem recklessly to support a unaffordable full dividend.
Okay. Because they're looking for a spending cap. That's why they're supporting it. Right? A reckless, this is their, but they just don't want to participate. Oh, they tried to participate. I mean, they're not participating the way that you want.
A unaffordable full dividend. We need their cooperation.
This is a hell of a way to get it. I'm just saying. This is your pickle too. You need to get in here, baby. We need you gotta.
A unaffordable full dividend. We need their cooperation. We believe that we will be on the floor with this budget by next week. It's our anticipation.
Okay. They're winning friends and influencing people everywhere. Oh, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. I could spend the next 2 hours on this whole presser. I really could. But we're up against the break, so I guess we'll jump into that, and we'll come back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. God, it's crazy. We'll be back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Matt just said, I've checked out of Alaska politics for the last 3 years and randomly just happened onto your show. Just like I never left. Same old discussion. Unbelievable. No matter how many politicians you change out, nothing in Juneau ever changes. Matt, you feel my pain, brother. You feel my pain. I have been having the same basic conversation on this show for 20 years. Sometimes the players change, maybe some of the details, but the overall theme and the overall problem that we're pointing out over and over and over again, the same problem. You are 100% correct, Matt. And quite honestly, you probably saved yourself some serious mental stress by just checking out of the politics. Kevin McCabe said, I would have to look when I ask him how many amendments there were. He says, it's not our budget. If they wanted cooperation, they would hear minority bills. They would pass minority amendments, consider education amendments, not have secret conversations in the Senate, and so much more. Senator Rob Myers says the people have changed, but the structure hasn't. And it's been this way for 50 years. So we got to break something. I mean, we got to break something. So we got to break the system, because he's right. The structure hasn't changed. The people have changed, but the structure is the same. And they keep in just the right amount of old guard business as usual people to indoctrinate all the newbies. And so the system perpetuates itself. We've got to find a way to break the cycle. How do we break the cycle? I don't know yet. Rick says, Matt Johnson, spot on, bud, spot on. And he's 100% true. I mean, 100% true. The song remains the same, says Brian. This is, yeah, I think Matt wins the internet for today with his comment. He said, it's just this, it's same old. He goes, unbelievable. Absolute. Do you feel my frustration, Matt? Do you feel it? Can you smell what I'm cooking from here? I'm going to go back to bed when the show is over. Rob says the cycle will break when we completely run out of money. And this has been kind of what I was talking about on Monday. And I know, I mean, Sarah Vance got a little wide-eyed when I threw it out there, and she said they did. And that's when I said, just give us the money and just drain all the accounts, drain them all. CBR, SBR, whatever. If we can train wreck this thing before they get into the permanent fund itself, we'll have something to rebuild when it's all said and done. But like I said, and like I've said before, you're never going to get an addict to change until they hit rock bottom. And the legislature is just like a crack fiend or a doper or an alcoholic or whatever. They refuse to acknowledge that there is they're acknowledging now a little bit. Oh, there's a problem. We didn't see it coming. We didn't see it coming. And now they're in the middle of it. And it won't be until they are completely out of money that they'll realize. And you know what'll happen? The worst part is that many of them won't even be around to face the music. They'll just bail out. They'll just go to some other state. I mean, look at Gary Stevens. He's moving to Hawaii. I mean, he's not going to be, we saw the same thing. Hank Hove in Fairbanks. I remember it was a comment that he made to me in one of my last interviews with him. Hank Hove was a legislator. He was a former mayor and ended up working. And he was like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm retiring somewhere else. That was essentially his, I'm not, that's not an exact quote, but that's the gist of it. I'm like, what happens when this and this? He goes, oh, I'll be retired. I'm retiring. I can't remember where he retired to, someplace in the Midwest or something. He was retired outside. So he got his, and he's taking it all to go somewhere else. Matt, maybe you shouldn't have stuck out of politics for a little bit. He said, Alaska needs a disruptor in the governor's office who's willing to play hardball. The legislature will never change until they're forced to change. What you need is somebody who's willing to be a one-term governor and be the bad guy or girl, I guess I guess that's what you need. Who's willing to be a one-term governor and go in there and make the mess that they need to make. Yeah, it's a thing. Perhaps helping reach rock bottom by giving Alaskans a disposable income to put into the private economy will demonstrate to the Alaska legislators the power of private money in the economy and help out Alaskans. Maybe. Not that they're ever going to let that happen. Listen to the disdain in the voices of these guys. All right, jumping back in. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Okay, we're back. We're back to it. Okay, so we're continuing on with this press conference. And I probably should have just skipped the whole humanities discussion this morning, but I was just so irritated by it that I wanted to get to it. So the presser goes on for quite a while here, and there were some really interesting questions that were asked throughout the press conference by some of the local reporters. And one of the questions, and I think it was Sean McGuire from the ADN that asked it. When I was recording it and then cutting it up, at this point I'd cut out whoever asked the question, but he was asked, because he was going on and on and on about the PFD. And Josephson was asked, is this a PFD issue? Is the main sticking point of this whole budget the PFD issue or the school funding? And I think he was a little disingenuous, quite honestly, because to many of those in the legislature, I know many on the right have said that one of the reasons why they won't vote for the funding is not necessarily, part of the issue is how do we pay for it? But the other thing was, we're not just giving you money when you don't have any policy things that you want to talk about. But see, Josephson, he wanted to spin it back into the idea that somehow this is just math, which, like they have any idea how math works based on what they're doing.
So my answer is that it's more of a dividend problem than a school funding problem. The delta between a $680 and $1,000 per student is about $75 million. The delta between a full dividend and a responsible dividend is in excess of $1 billion. So you can see the math is obvious. The BSA issue is not fundamentally, is it expensive? Sure it is. Must we do it? You bet we must do it. And it's much less than inflation would call for. But the BSA growth fundamentally is not the problem in this budget, in my belief.
See what they did there? You see how he did that? See how he twisted it to a reasonable PFD versus a full PFD? And how now it's the PFD's fault that we're not funding it? No talk about policy, no talk about achievement. It must be done.
But the BSA growth, you bet we must do it. And it's much less than inflation would call for.
Okay, it's much less than inflation would. Again, totally ignoring that we did a bunch of one-time funding, that just 10 short years ago, we were spending more per capita per student than any other state in the nation. We will still in the toilet on our, achievement scores. Nothing. See how they're setting this up? Now they're setting it up as a PFD versus funding the schools. There's some desperation here, folks. It's the math, right? It's the math. Like they would know math if it came up and smacked them right in the face. So then it goes on to somebody asked, I think it was, I think I actually have the,
Becky Bohr.
Yeah, so it's Becky Bohr from the AP. So she asked a really good question, because he's going on and on and on about how it's the minority, on and on and on about how it's the minority that they're reaching out to and saying, so she wants to know, but what about your own caucus, members of your own caucus who voted for a full dividend? Here's the question, and we'll come to, here we go.
Becky Bohr with the Associated Press. Representative Josephson, you talked about it being, beyond your belief that how people can still support a full dividend, and called on the minority just to work with you. But you have members of your own caucus on finance who support that same thing. So can you talk about what conversations there are to sort of move the needle, or is this? Are you absolutely needing to have the minority give you the votes that members of your own majority won't?
Okay, so then he goes on for like 3 minutes about how he used to live in the bush and it's such a thing. He goes on and on about this. And then he finally gets to the meat of it. Man, we're going to run out of time. I should have started. We may ask David to hold up for a little bit, because I really want to keep going through this a little bit more. I got more, but so here's his answer after he bloviates for a while about, I know exactly how you feel. Here's his answer.
I respect their opinion on this matter. And some of this comes from a desire for sort of a basic income structure.
Universal basic income. That's, again, trying to tie the PFD back to universal basic income.
Basic income structure, right? That it's the erosion of the dividend spells the erosion of that value. But we live in a world where maybe we can get to yes on some S-corp reforms and some internet tax reforms.
Remember what they said before? Nobody from our nobody from our coalition is voting for the taxes, except for those taxes.
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people writ large, although we heard different messages in Anchorage, are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
Did you hear that?
Although we heard different messages in Anchorage.
So first of all, Anchorage, tax me, daddy, tax me harder. Okay, that was the first thing. But what he's saying is, buckle up, buttercup, because free rides die hard.
Are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
Like we haven't been investing. Like we haven't been investing in our state government. Like you haven't taken huge chunks of our PFD. Like you haven't received all the royalties that we as owners never see. You're taking it directly. But all of a sudden, we need to invest in our own state. Where did you think the money came from, Jack? It still came from us. We just never had it in our hands. You guys are getting it directly. You're bypassing the middleman.
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people writ large, although we heard different messages in Anchorage, are ready for themselves to invest in their state government. So here we are. We have 25% of the oil production we used to have, falling prices. This is our new reality. So what I've found about Alaska is we are at one and the same time, the richest state sitting on $80 billion that other states could only dream of. And yet a troubled place where we have years and billions of dollars of deferred maintenance issues.
And whose fault is that? Right? I mean, whose fault is the deferred maintenance? You are the legislature. You're supposed to direct that kind of stuff. Whose fault is all of this? I mean, whose fault is it?
And yet a troubled place where we have years and billions of dollars of deferred maintenance issues. We have test scores that we're concerned about, and the list goes on and on. So look, I'm not saying that people who want the PFD in its entirety aren't speaking to a set of values. We just have a significant math problem.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're wrong. I think he's saying we're delusional. It's a math problem that they created. That's the thing. It's a math problem that they themselves created. We're going to continue with this after the top of the hour and then pick it up with David Boyle, The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. I mean, my God, did you hear that? At the thing that did you? I mean, what?
What I've found about Alaska is we are at one and the same time, the richest state sitting on $80 billion that other states could only dream of.
Yes, absolutely. That money came from us, by the way. I'm just saying.
And yet a troubled place where we have years and billions of dollars of deferred maintenance issues. We have test scores that we're concerned about, and the list goes on and on.
All of this, we've been, I just
writ large.
But this is the.
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people.
We say,
are.
I'm going to clip this because let me just complete the sentence. I'll take out the little thing writ large. Here's what it is.
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
If that doesn't just make you want to punch your monitor or kick the cat or whatever it is that you do for frustration relief, that
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
Except for Anchorage, where they're enlightened. Where they're enlightened about this whole thing. Yeah, we're just not ready to invest in our own. We're just not ready to. You guys had all the money. You took all the. We own the resource collectively, so the money is going straight into your bank account that you, the legislature, then spend. This is not an us problem. This is a you problem. You're responsible. I mean, deferred maintenance and all these other things that he talks about a few seconds later. Again, who was in charge this whole time? The legislators and both parties, left and right. I mean, Republicans, you guys ain't getting out of this scot-free because it was under your watch that they spent $16 billion out of the CBR. Mike Kronk says, it's like I stated yesterday. Mike Kronk was on the program yesterday. It's the way we've always done it. It must change. There must be thoughts on how to do that, just that. Unfortunately, everyone sees the light again 10 years from now where oil production could be the highest in the last 20 years. Keep the system rigged to play the political games, and this is what we'll always have. Every year will be exactly the same. Having a vision doesn't fit the political agenda of each election. Again, Mike, you're saying the right things here, and I agree. But again, you wouldn't even commit to not putting the thing inside the formula. I understand. Yes, you and I agree on that. But we've got to take a stand at some point then and say, well, then we'll do a one-time fund. We can't keep this going. We can't keep this thing rocket. We just can't do it. Rob says once the PFD is gone, it'll be education versus Medicaid. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be. Well, let them, duke it out, right? Tax me harder, Daddy. Tax me harder. Every single one of them, says Kevin, sitting on the dais during that press conference were complicit or in office when we rated the CBR of the 15, 16, 17 billion dollars. Most of them were in office. Edmund, Josephson, and Stutz. Or maybe, I think it was Edmund, Josephson, and Stutz. I don't think Kopp was in there yet. But whatever. They've all been part and parcel of the same thing. These are the same people that were just okay with it. I mean, if only we could find Alaskans
are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
What did I tell you? What was it that I told you? Do you remember? Do you remember what I said? It's time for you to pay your fair share. That's what I said that they were going to tell you. This is him. This is a nice way of saying you need to pay your fair share. That's what it's about. David Boyle is in the chat. David, I'm going to bring him on stage real quick. David, can you hang out for a few minutes before I get to you?
You betcha. Sure can.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a roll here, and I'm not quite done with what I was doing before I hit the top of the hour. So I'm going to come back to you. Just hang out in the green room and try not to claw your own eyes out while I, put all this bad stuff in there with you. We're gonna do it. It just I'm gonna get to you, but we'll get to you after the first segment. I need one more segment to kind of wrap this up. Nobody in the legislature, says Matt, who again won the internet earlier with his commentary. Nobody in the legislature is willing to put themselves out there. It's always been that way. When somebody has has the timidity to actually stand, the rest of the legislators, even those who claim to be conservatives, turn on them like a pack of wolves. We saw that during the governor's veto process early on, right? When he was, we saw that early on. We knew what was going on. My dog just came into the studio. Lay down. So he's right. He's 100% right. All right. We're going to jump into this. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, good morning. How are you this morning? How's it going? We have been rocking and rolling here in hour one this morning, going over the press conference from the House Majority on Tuesday, picking that apart. David Boyle is hanging out in the green room right now for us, so we're going to get to him in a minute. He's been kind enough to allow me to finish up what I've been talking about here because this is taking a little bit longer than I anticipated. I should have just jumped right in at the beginning of hour one, but anyway, we're continuing, for those of you just joining us, to go over the commentary from the legislators, the House Majority members from last Tuesday, where they said things like this.
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
Okay. When there's again, what have I been telling you for the last 3 years? What are they going to say? It's time for you to pay your fair share. It's time for you to pony up. Free rides die hard. That's just a nice way of saying of investing in Alaska. It's time for Alaskans to invest in Alaska. That's a thing. And yes, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. This is not strictly a party problem because 2 of the members on that dais were Republicans, ostensibly Republicans. And more. So anyway, we're going to go on here. There's only a couple more questions that I wanted to get into, but it goes on here, and I got to be honest with you. I am so frustrated watching what these folks are saying. But we get on to the next question. This one is for Chuck. This one is for Chuck Kopp. And here's the question from I think this is well anyway, you'll hear it.
Thank you, James Brooks from the Alaska Beacon.
Thank you, James. It's James Brooks from the Alaska Beacon, who actually does a pretty good job overall. He doesn't always hit it, but he does good.
I wanted to flip Becky's question a little bit and ask you, Representative Kopp, you've advocated cutting the dividend in order to balance the budget, but are opposed to tax increases. Why should regular Alaskans bear the financial burden of balancing the budget, but not oil companies?
I mean, that's not a bad question. Why should regular Alaskans? Why should cutting the PFD harms who? The vast majority of Alaskans, the private economy, that's who it harms? It's not a bad question. Chuck Kopp.
Thank you for the question, James. So right now, our oil and gas industry is recovering from the COVID-19 setback, and we are currently on the...
Wait, you think the rest of the economy is not still recovering from the COVID-19 setback? You think other private businesses aren't...
setback, and we are currently on the verge of a renaissance in the energy industry, where we have the Pickle project, Santos Pickle Phase 1. By the end of next year, should be putting in $200 million of new revenue and oil in the pipeline by the end of next year. If that goes as planned, we know what Pickle Phase 2 is, and that's going to be $400 to $450 million in additional revenue from new oil coming into the line.
Now, this to me sounds like a perfect time to come back and sit down and take a look at the oil tax structure again. I mean, if they're about to bring all this new oil online and they're about to do all these things, maybe again, it's been 10 years. Maybe we should look at the oil tax structure again. Do you think after they've invested all this kind of stuff, they're just going to pick up their balls and bats and go home? I mean, we own the playing field, right? I mean, we own all that.
These are investments that they have put out, I'll bet, based on a higher price point than we have now in the market with oil. As we pointed out, price of oil is going down rapidly and oil futures do not look good. Also, Willow has a number of projects that they're bringing online. I don't want to kill an energy renaissance when it is just forming, coming online, and showing tremendous promise.
So what he's saying here is, I don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg that gives us money. So taking the PFD, damaging the private economy, damaging those that can least afford it, that's okay. That's okay. We'll take the money because COP is no fan of the PFD, right? That's okay. We'll take that, but we don't want to startle the golden goose away that is oil. That's, again, there's got to be a balance. This is a finite resource that we as owners should be getting maximum yield from, because we're only going to get to tax it one time. And he talks about Willow and Pica. Well, some of that's on federal land. Willow, I mean, this is where Brad Keithley talked about, we're actually going to lose money on that deal. More oil and receive less money for it.
Alaska is sitting on the verge of, I think, unprecedented energy production, which
God, please grant us another pipeline boom. We promise not to piss this one away. Remember that bumper sticker? I'm paraphrasing it, but remember? That's what they're looking for, the next boom. They don't want to have to control their spending.
Overall. So we'll have to look at that too. But timing is everything on resource taxation. I believe that is the one industry that does pay for public safety, does pay for education, does pay for our transportation infrastructure.
Okay, wait a minute. What really pays for all that? Let me just back that up.
Timing is everything. I believe that is the one industry that does pay for public safety, does pay for education, does pay for our transportation infrastructure.
How much are they taking from the PFD every year for the last 10 years? What are they using to backfill the lion's share of that? It's not the oil industry revenues only account for 26% of state revenues. The vast majority of that is coming from the ERA. It's coming from the earnings of the permanent fund, which includes their taking of the PFD. It's not the oil companies who are paying for that. They're only paying for 26% of the overall budget.
I believe that is the one industry that does pay for public safety, does pay for education, does pay for our transportation infrastructure. So I'm not interested in going there. I do feel that the dividend is one thing we look at when we compare it to all other state agency spending. We know that $2.5 billion for a dividend is wildly too much.
Because we know better than you how to spend your money. See, and you notice how he said state spending. This is that whole poisonous pill of it's no longer just a transfer to the people. Now it's state spending.
I do feel that the dividend is one thing we look at when we compare it to all other state agency spending. We know that $2.5 billion for a dividend is wildly too much. And I think coming to a firm grip on what a sustainable dividend is really, do we cap it at $1,000? Inflation proof it? Do we put a geographic differential on it? I'm all for a needs-based dividend.
I'm all for a needs-based dividend. Of course you are, Chuck.
If I thought I had 21 votes to change the formula, I would drop the bill tomorrow. And I'm constantly talking about it with members to see what we can do. Because I believe once we resolve that, we can have a much clearer picture of what we need for revenue rather than arguing over the dividend every time.
Okay. That is the most scariest comment in this whole thing. And I don't know if you caught it, but let me just replay it.
We can have a much...
Let me get the whole thing.
Because I believe once we resolve that, we can have a much clearer picture of what we need for revenue.
I believe once we've resolved that and taken the majority of the PFD, we'll have a much clearer picture of what we need for revenue. They want more. More! That's what they're asking for. More!
Rather than arguing over the dividend every time. Thanks, James.
So, oh my God. Oh my God. All right. The final little blurb here. I mean, there's more, but this is the final one we're going to get time to comment on before we go over to David Boyle. And you should go watch this whole thing for yourself. You really should. I mean, you probably want to take some Xanax and a glass of whiskey before you do. But I posted links up in the chat room right now. You can go over to KTOO, Gavel to Gavel. They've got it up there. This is all coming from their audio, so courtesy of them. Thank you. Final question to Andy Josephson about the PFD. And this is another good one from Jeff Landfield. I thought this was pretty good.
Hi, Jeff Landfield. I wanted to ask more broadly. I asked the minority this question. I remember there was a decade plus ago, there was 18 billion and 16 billion in the CBR and 2 billion more in the SBR, and all that money got spent. But then 3 years ago, when there was a windfall, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the Senate passed a $5,500 dividend, and the House almost was going to agree with it. You got to adjourn. And so it seems like this, every time there's a crisis, everybody gets excited and acknowledge the crisis. But then when things change and there's a windfall, there's just a rush to spend money on dividends or government. So how can the public be sure that that won't happen again if there's a windfall again?
This is a dynamite question, because this has been the problem in Alaska for years. We run from crisis to crisis. We're the Pirates of the Caribbean, where we got to rock the ship, right? We run from one side to the other. We're in feast. We've got more money than we know what to spend to. We're on the other side. Oh my God, the sky is falling. What do? We've got to tax everybody. And then back to feast, right? Chuck Kopp just talked about, we're going to look at Pickle. Look at all this thing. Look at all the things that are coming up. Oh, it's going to be great. We'll have another oil boom and we can, and then it'll crash again, because we're a resource-driven economy instead of creating something that's a little more stable or living within our means within that stability. The Landfield asked a dynamite question here. What's to say that this... And Andy Josephson.
Well, Jeff, I remember the fifth.
Well, I must say, this is after Bryce Edgman goes on for about 5 minutes as a precursor. Anyway, Andy Josephson.
Well, Jeff, I remember the $5,500 dividend dropped on the floor like it was yesterday. And I was one of the leaders proudly to hold that number back and maintain 11 votes to bring some order. Because without that, the ERA would be down $1.5 billion or whatever it would be down.
Yeah, because that's where they're supposed to come from. It's from the ERA. That's the statutory. That's what the statute says. Take the money from the but it'd be down then. But see, that would harm his other plan.
So that was the right decision. Could we send over a full dividend to the conference committee? Sure. But it so runs against the majority of the majority's inclinations. As the majority leader noted, the POMV is central to us. It was in, I think, one of our 3 main tenets when we formed.
Of course it was, because it is the free money where they don't have to talk and be responsible and be responsive to the citizenry or the private economy. Of course they don't want, oh no, we can't. This is why they want to combine the ERA and the permanent fund itself, so they can have access to even more money. MOAR, more money.
And I've told folks I will lay down on the train tracks on that POMV thing.
Oh, really? Do you promise? Do you promise? Because.
And I've told folks I will lay down on the train tracks on that POMV thing. I'm not going to support violating the 5% rule, because it's a road to nowhere.
Let me tell you what's a road to nowhere. Let me tell you what's a road to nowhere. Spending more than we take in, and then going back and telling people it's time for them to invest in the state when they have been the only investors in the state since the beginning. Promise me you'll lay down on the tracks for this. Please, promise me. All right. You can go back and listen to this whole press conference, and I've only pulled out the juiciest gems that I could find in the limited time that I had to kind of cut this up and go over this. You should go back and listen to this, because the insanity that it is our legislative process right now and our legislative majority. This is part of the problem, because this is going to continue, folks. This is the same muck, this is the same muck that I've been arguing about for 20 years on this program. 20 damn years. And yes, I can gratefully say, I told you so. But it doesn't help my kids. It doesn't help my grandkids. It doesn't help your family or your kids to say this is exactly what I said they were going to do, and they're doing it now. It's insane. Absolutely, positively insane. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. David Boyle's coming up next. He's going to step into a barn burner, huh? Good for him. All right, we're back with more. We're going to talk about pupil-teacher ratio and the lies that we're being told. We'll be back right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Sorry. I just that one piece was that was everything right there. That one piece where basically Alaskans are not ready yet to pay to have the full PFD, or to invest in the state.
One thing they know about me
is just I didn't bookmark that. I should have bookmarked it, because it's
in UPAC Village.
Oh, this is where he's bloviating about living in the villages.
Is in Anchorage are ready for.
There you go. There we go. Right there. That's it. Let me clip this out right here. Here it is. This says it all.
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
Because apparently we haven't been investing in the state government this whole time. We haven't done a thing. That money just came on like manna from heaven. That's where it came down from. Except, of course, for the people, those folks in Anchorage, right?
Writ large, although we heard different messages in Anchorage.
Yeah, because they're morons in Anchorage. There's a whole bunch of nanny staters in Anchorage who are like, tax me harder, daddy. Tax me harder. That's what that's what it's all about. Oh, it's all right. I gotta let me. I'm gonna actually highlight this section.
But we don't yet live.
I gotta highlight this whole section here and bookmark it here because, and then I'm gonna save it. Okay, I'm gonna close that down because otherwise I'm just gonna be tempted to go back over that again and again. I tax me harder, Daddy. And on the back of the shirt, you say, and pull my hair. All right. Let's get things ready here. David Boyle has been patient. So nice of him, one, to come on the program, but two, to remain patiently in the wings while I pulled this whole thing up. Hey, Dave, how you doing, sir? How's it going?
I'm doing fine, Michael, but I'm already exhausted.
How do you think I feel? I woke up tired this morning and it's just gotten worse. That's kind of the whole thing is. Yeah, I mean, this is a tough act to follow, my friend.
It really is, but you did a great job on it, and I'm going to go back and listen to it myself and find some other good little points and cuts out of there. But
it's gold. I mean, there's just so much stupidity in what's going on. I mean, they just, that they cannot help themselves. Every phrase out of their mouth, the smarminess and the "we know better than you" is just dripping from every commentary that they have in there. I mean, it's just, I can't fathom why you would want a full PFD. Because we obviously, the implication is we are so much better at spending the money. But this is the same thing the school district's doing, right? Don't talk to us about policy. Don't talk. We just shut up and give us the money. Right.
But what they really displayed was their principles and their belief system in that press conference. And that's very good. Very seldom do we see that.
Yeah. Yep. All right. David Boyle is our guest. We're going to continue here. Don't go anywhere. We will be back as we jump back into this. 15 seconds out right now. We're going to talk about the student-teacher ratio. And this is an interesting discussion because it shows, well, I'll tell you what it shows here in a second because we're about to rejoin. So let's get to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yeah. I mean, even David laughed when they said a pinch of intellect. I know that is funny. David Boyle is our guest, senior contributor for Must Read Alaska, and education advocate, education correspondent for the show here, the Michael Duke Show. And we brought him on. I'm trying to climb down off my high perch here from the last two segments, David. So I apologize, but we brought him on to talk about student-teacher ratio, pupil-teacher ratio, PTR, in the Alaska schools. And this kind of I'm still kind of on a theme, though, here, David, which is these people will say anything to get their funding in. They will lie. They will lie through omission. They will lie through stretching or mangling the truth. And they do this time and time. I mean, how many times now have we heard the Anchorage School District say, we're gonna cut over 400 teacher positions. Think about all these teachers who are going to lose their jobs. And then you find out that 360 of those positions are unfilled. Right? I mean, that was right. One of the numbers, right? Was that it was like over 360 of those positions were unfilled. So we're only talking about, I mean, it's a tragedy for every one of them, but we're not talking about 400. We're talking about 40 teachers.
Right, Michael. And actually, Anchorage School Board President Andy Holloman, who was the former president of the Anchorage Teachers Union, which is kind of ironic, he actually said that we have 200 funded vacant teacher positions. Those are teacher positions only. And we only expect to lose about 195 of those. So we're probably not going to have to let any teachers get they'll get pink slips, but none of them will be, let's say, let go. That's eye-opening. They have a lot of other funded vacant positions, very similar to what the state of Alaska has.
Right.
And it's just their little piggyback.
That's another lie, right? Because they say 400 teachers, but what they don't tell you is that only 200 of them are teaching positions, because there's a lot of teachers with certificates who are in administrative roles. And so they lump them all together as if they're all in the classroom. When you hear 400 teachers are getting laid off, you think that's all 400 teachers from 400 classrooms, but it's not, because only half of them are actually in the classroom. And the rest of them are all administrators with teaching certificates. So again, it's another deception. And this is what they do time and time and time again.
You're exactly right. And this just doesn't happen in the public school environments. This happens in any large bureaucracy. Let's take, for example, the VA, the Veterans Administration, get a little side. Everybody, let's say the nurses, for example, which my wife's a nurse, they get tired of doing, the actual patient hands-on nursing care after about 10 years. And then they get initially start shift work. They work mids and swings, but they get kind of burned out on that, a lot of them. And they see, wow, there's a position open in administration right over there. And I get a $5,000 a year pay raise. The same thing happens in education bureaucracies, let's say the Anchorage School District. And if you have any smarts at all, and let's say you don't really particularly like classroom teaching, then you want to migrate upwards in the bureaucratic pyramid and keep moving up, get a higher pay raise and get more power as well, better hours. Now, I have to admit, there are the effective classroom teachers that really love to teach. They don't want to do that because they love to see the kids get motivated and achieve and learn and go on, let's say, to college or career as well. By the way, I have to say, concerning your discussion on the House Majority press conference, House Bill 69, the education bill to, quote, raise the BSA by $1,000, is being heard this morning in Senate Finance at 9 o'clock. That should be a very eye-opening experience, even for the Senate Finance Committee people like Lyman Hoffman.
Right,
so
right.
I'm going to listen in on that one for sure. And I listened to a lot of testimony and read a lot of written testimony from, let's say, teachers, in particular from the major school districts and some of the smaller ones as well, like down in Sitka, which Representative Himshoot is the sponsor of this bill, and she's from Sitka. And the teachers were complaining, like, I've got 45 kids in my classroom, and, it's really hard to teach.
Right.
Come to find out, the State Department of Education is required every year within the first 30 days of the session to provide an annual report to the legislature, the Senate and the House. And in one of those, it's, I remember 180 pages long, I guess. Starting on page 88, you can go there and you will find the pupil teacher ratio for every school in the state of Alaska.
Before you get into the details of this, I want to backtrack just a second, because you're right, because we've heard this testimony. 40 children in my class. I've got so many students. We don't have enough desks. There's not enough pencils. They're eating each other in the classroom. I mean, right? I mean, this is the kind of stuff we're hearing, right? There's not enough desks, that it's madness. It's chaos. It's dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. This is what we're hearing, right? From all this stuff. But it turns out, because you dove into the actual numbers of not only the broad overall averages of the district itself, at the different levels, kindergarten, grade school, middle school, high school, but also of the individual schools themselves. Did you drill down into the different classes like special ed and some of those other ones as well, or how far did you go?
No, I did not drill. It's not broken out by special ed. It's just broken out by, let's say, high school, middle school, charter school, and elementary schools. Let's say, for example, overall in Fairbanks, the pupil-teacher ratio. Now, this is the big picture. I know that. So you have a lot of exceptions to this.
Right. That's the
pupil-teacher-
caveat. You actually say that at the beginning of the article, right? That there's a big picture, broad picture, 10,000-foot view, and then you drill down into the individual schools. So it's still not as microscopic as it could get, where you could start breaking it out by different classes and some other things else.
Yes.
And if you have special ed classes that only have 3 or 4 kids in it, that's going to skew the. So this is averages by school, but again, they're saying that there's 40 students in these schools, right? 40. I mean, that
in
was
the classes. Yes.
in the class systems. I'm sorry. And so you drilled down. So tell us, what did you find? Give us the big picture first, and then we'll take a break and come back and look at the more macular or micro picture, I guess. Look at the macro first and then the micro.
Okay. For example, in the big 5 school districts, which most people know who those are, the major cities, the pupil-teacher ratio is less than 20. Now, that's the big picture. You have to drill down to really see what's going on. And what you'll note is, for example, in Anchorage, the Aquarian Charter School has got a little over 17 students per teacher. And there are probably not very many special ed, if any, in Aquarian Charter School. It's probably the second best charter school in Anchorage. And you go to like Clark Middle School, very tough school, very, very tough school, tough neighborhood, let's just say that. Less than 17 students per classroom. So this goes on, and except for Anchorage's correspondence schools, where you have like maybe 200 kids per teacher in the family partnership correspondence school, all the schools in Anchorage have a pupil-teacher ratio of less than 23 students per teacher. And you look at Fairbanks, I could say the same thing, except for the correspondence schools. All the schools have a pupil-teacher ratio of less than 21 students per teacher.
Right. Well, and again, if you look at the district numbers, and that's the big picture, Anchorage is at 17.95 per student, students to teachers. Fairbanks is at 19.1. Matsu is at 18.8. Juneau is at 16.4, and Kenai's at 15.92. That's the big picture. That's before you drill down into the individual schools. And you don't have Sitka on here. It'd have been interesting to see what Sitka was, because of the chick that was saying, I got 40 kids in my classroom and they're eating each other. I mean, that would have been.
I do have Sitka, Michael. Sitka.
Oh, okay. Just
12.32 students per teacher.
No. She just said they have 40 students in every class, David, and that there's not enough desks. And
was that him shoot?
No, that was, you said that the teacher was saying that in Sitka, testimony was saying we had 40 students per classroom, but what they're reporting. So either one, because then somebody said, well, wait, that's all teachers. That's not just classroom teachers. Well, if it's not just classroom teachers, then you're doing the report wrong, because that's not what pupil-teacher ratio is supposed to be. If you're including all administrators in that, you're doing it wrong. Because plain reading that's not what the law calls for. If that's the case, then you're wrong. And if it really was the other way around, why wouldn't they report it correctly to show how broad, and then say demand that we need more teachers, right? If it really was 40 in a classroom or 30 in a classroom, if they didn't include all the teachers in the administration, it would show a much larger number, and then they could point to it and say, look, see, it's total BS. It's total obfuscation and muddying the waters so they can argue to get their monies. Final thought for this segment, David.
The basis of their demanding to inflation proof and raise the BSA by $1,000 per student. The basis for that is the classrooms are too crowded. We have too many students per teacher. Therefore, we need more teachers. We need more money.
Except that we have less students than we had last year and less students than that than the year before, and less students going forward for the next foreseeable future. I mean, other than that, perfect. That's a perfect example.
Right, Michael. When you take out and discount the correspondence and homeschool students, you're down to about 102,000 students in the brick and mortar schools. And that's a tremendously low figure. And the other big lie, which I'd like to say, is the fact that the education industry and the teachers, whoever, they all tout the fact that it's only $1,000 increase in the BSA. And unfortunately, most people don't understand the foundation formula. By the time you roll that through the foundation formula, it really jumps way up per student.
Yeah. I mean, when the base student allocation is $5,000 at the raw number, and the Anchorage School District's getting something like $7,800 per student for every one of those, it's a problem. We're going to continue. David Boyle's our guest, senior contributor for Must Read Alaska, education advocate and analyst for the show. We're going to be back with more in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I would like to, just to set David aside for a second here, just to talk to the chat room. I would love to do shows like we did in the first hour more, but I don't know if blood may shoot out of my eyes if I do that. I mean, it's good because it just shows the hypocrisy over and over and over again of these people, but I don't know if my heart could handle it. I might lose my mind. Secondly, for those of you who are members of the Common Sense Corps, I don't know if you saw the post that I made in the Common Sense Corps Facebook page, which you can access only if you're a member of the Common Sense Corps. But I'm considering doing a Common Sense Corps broadcast once a month, where on the show for the full 2 hours, we do nothing but take video calls, just like people would appear, just like David does here on the screen. I'd give them a link and they could join in, and we could have multiple Common Sense Corps members in there and have discussions about things that are going on in state government. So if that's something you're interested in and you're not a member of the Common Sense Corps, you should go over there and check it out at michaeldukeshow.com. Just click on Join the Corps. If you are already a member of the Common Sense Corps, thank you for supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. It's not a bad way to do it. And you could participate in that roundtable madness. That would be amazing. It'd be amazing to have, I can have up to 10 people all together on the show with me at any given time through StreamYard. And so it would be a fun thing. If you want that and it's something you're interested in, go over to the Common Sense Corps Facebook page and click and let me know what you think. I mean, I think that would be amazing. All right, David, sorry, I had to take care of that housekeeping there for, man, my Lord, this is just, I don't even know what to say. But I mean, let's go back for just a second to talk about, because that was one of the arguments that I heard somebody say. I think it was on a Facebook post, or maybe it was in the comments of the actual article. Somebody said, well, you're not seeing the full picture because they're including all the administrators that have teaching certificates. To which I said, no, that if you did that, that's not what the law calls for. And it's not what the common reading of the statute says. We're talking about classroom teachers, not everybody in the building with a teaching certificate, classroom teachers. And so, I mean, am I wrong, or are they reporting it correctly?
No, you're right, Michael. And that's what the statute says, pupil teacher ratio in the classroom. And, I was really surprised. My article on Must Read Alaska, I got so much blowback. And some of the people I've never seen comment on any articles before appeared. And I thought, and one teacher said, I have 40 students in my class, la-di-da, la-di-da. And I thought, well, and she sounds like a very good teacher, a very effective teacher, because she loves to teach, she said. And I appreciate that as well. But golly, when you're taking that flack like that, you're probably really over the target. And I don't know if any of the legislators have actually read this report but I'm going to send it to the good.
Are you kidding? These are the same legislators that were shocked, I tell you, that we're out of money. They obviously haven't been reading the governor's 10-year forecast for the last 5 years. Because for the last 5 years, the 10-year forecast says tough times are coming. And they just all of a sudden this year, they're like, whoa, wait a minute, we're broke? I mean, they're shocked, I tell you, that they're broke. You think they're really reading that, David? Come on.
Well, I hope the good ones are. I'm going to personally send it to them, the good legislators in both the Senate and the House, and tell them, hey, here's a great talking point. You need to start using it and pushing back against this firestorm of overloaded classrooms. But as you know, one of the problems with putting increasing funding, let's say in the foundation formula, the base student allocation, is that then it's in the baseline forever. And try to pull it out. And the condition that fiscal condition the state's in today, and with the price of oil probably going down to maybe $35, $40 a barrel, we're in dire straits.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're maybe they're going to, well, I think maybe they're hoping that, I think this is the irony, is that maybe the Trump administration will do away with totally, for the most part, with the Department of Education. And just as they said, block grant the money to the states, and we'll get a big bucket of money from the states. I think that's good for some states. For Alaska, I think that would be detrimental, because I think it would just go to waste again, and it wouldn't go into the classrooms, and it wouldn't go into education reform. But what might bring the good part about this fiscal crisis in the K-12, let's say, is the fact that this may bring on real education reform, like education savings accounts. It will be a lot cheaper than sending a kid to a brick and mortar school. And Senator Shelley Hughes has that.
I was just going to say, Shelley has education scholarship accounts, is what she's talking about, backpack funding, which I think would be amazing if we could get it in there. I'm all in support of it. We'll have to see where it goes. We're 8 seconds out here, David. Hold the line. Folks, we're about to continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
That's right. Not your daddy, but you could pay me taxes. Tax me harder, daddy. Yes, I'd take it. Welcome back to the program. David Boyle is our guest, senior contributor for Must Read Alaska, education analyst and commentator for the Michael Duke Show. David, so we looked at the big picture overview, again, that you pulled out of this report. And this report is required by Alaska statute, right? AS 14.03.078 is the annual progress report that has to be submitted to the state deed every year by the schools. And the overall views, let me go over them again real quick before we dive down into the individual areas. And again, we know, this is the 10,000 foot view. So we know that there will be classes that have more or less, but the average pupil teacher ratio in Anchorage is 17.95 amongst all schools, 17.95 to 1. In Fairbanks, it's 19.1 to 1, which is the largest in the state. In Mat-Su, it's 18.89 to 1. In Juneau, it's 16.46 to 1. And in the Kenai, where all we're hearing about is how bad and good dogs and cats and massive, it's 15.92 to 1. Less than 16 students to one teacher in the classroom. Now, again, those are the macro views, but David, you then drilled down into each individual school in the districts. You said they don't give you the data for like special ed classes or some of those other things. So as far as you can get down is into the individual schools. Give me the highlights of what caught your attention in the individual schools.
Well, let me make one more point on the macro view, the 35,000 foot view. One of the things we must consider as well in that view is that there are some huge classes in the correspondence schools, up to 200 students per teacher. So that skews it actually to an even higher ratio than maybe actually true. So what you want to look at some individual schools, Michael, in the districts, the big five?
Yeah, and let's touch on that again for what you just said, because each one of these districts has their own correspondence programs, right? And those what they call contact teachers, they have upwards of 200 students that each one of those teachers are responsible for. So if they're including those in the overall district numbers and not separating them out as a correspondence numbers, that's bringing those numbers higher than what they actually are. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So, I mean, you're right. Because if you've got teachers that's, 15, 18, 21, 18, 17, and then you got one teacher that's at 200, that's going to bring the overall average, the bell curve is going to come up. So I hadn't even thought about that. If they're counting the correspondence teachers in those same numbers, then those numbers even of themselves are incorrect and too high to begin with. But go ahead. You tell me what catches your eye here.
Well, I mentioned before that in Anchorage, if you discount the correspondence schools, which I've done, all the schools have a pupil-teacher ratio of less than 23 students per teacher. Now, you have to realize that when you get to a high school, the classes are maybe 30, 35, even a few higher.
Sure.
The most important part of that is the fact that in the elementary school, you only want about maybe 22 to 25 students per teacher. But it actually depends on the classroom environment and the behavior of the students in that classroom.
Well, that would make sense to me. Yeah, I mean, that would make sense to me. In the younger classes, especially when they're kids and they're less controllable, and you need smaller class sizes, 15, 12, 15, 18. But as you get older and you're getting ready for college, because I've been in a college class that had 100 students in it, right? You've got to be ready to be in an environment with 100, 200 kids in a lecture hall or things like that. So it makes sense that if a teenager, or now you're in high school, it would make more sense to be in a classroom that has 30 or 40 students, because now you're quasi adults and you're supposed to be able to. So that would make sense. But again, even your numbers are not showing that, even in the high schools, right? Lathrop High School, 18, that's my old alma mater. I went to Lathrop High School, graduated from Lathrop. 18.53 students per teacher on average in Lathrop. Kenai Central High, 18.10. Bartlett High School, 20.16. We're not talking about having 25, 26 in most class. The average class is less than 21 students.
For all the pushback and blowback I got from the education industry and some of the teachers on this article I wrote on Must Read Alaska, if they have a problem with the report, they probably should contact the Department of Education and say, hey, this doesn't really reflect what's going on, and ask why. Because either that or the report is meaningless, and let's not even do it, because it's not usable information as such. But you go to and I wrote down some of the scores on the Alaska STAR test, the standardized test, English language arts, reading, and math. Let's look at the Kenai Peninsula, which I think you probably favor. The charter school, Aurora Borealis Charter School, has a PTR of 16. The reading score is 70, really high. Math, I couldn't believe this one, is 90% of the kids are proficient in math. So somebody's doing something really good at that charter school. I'm not familiar with it. Perhaps you are. But then let's look at Skyview Middle School, 14 students per teacher. Their reading proficiency, 23% of the kids are proficient in reading at grade level, and 32% are proficient in math. So it's like there's no correlation between the number of students you have in a class and the student achievement in reading and mathematics.
Right.
It actually depends more so on the culture of that school, the culture that comes from the parents, the behavior of the students, and the effective classroom teachers that we have. And
Right.
I firmly believe anymore that the biggest problem with K-12 education is cultural. If you look at the national test, the NAEP test, the Department of Defense invariably is number one in reading every 2 years that it's done. So I think there's a cultural thing here. In Alaska,
Yeah.
hey, guess what? Alaska's ahead of New Mexico now.
This is the biggest problem, though, David, is that they are refusing to do any self-analysis, right? This has all become, it's just about the money. Instead of saying, what are we doing differently, or what are we doing wrong, or what aren't we doing? Instead of looking at places or at districts within the state that are doing excellent and saying, what are they doing to get there? They're instead saying, well, this is just a money issue. But again, we can go back to 2015 when the state of Alaska was spending more per student than any other state in the nation, and we were still 47th, 48th out of 51. Now we're 51 out of 53. I mean, this is not a money problem. This is a structural issue in the education system. 2 minutes, David.
Well, you're spot on with that remark. The objective of this is, as you know, the schools are losing their brick and mortar students to correspondence schools and private schools as well, and just independent homeschoolers. And to stem the flow, or to counteract that flow, because once you lose a student, you lose a certain amount of money depending on what type of student that is. Therefore, you're going to probably lose union members. And once you lose union members, you start losing your power and your control over the entire education system. So to keep those union members, you're going to have to increase the funding. So you're going to have, eventually you should have more teachers than you do today. But if it's anything like the Anchorage School District, where the teachers union wants a 15% 1 year salary increase, you'll see fewer teachers. So this is going to go on. The governor's got a good bill, education reform. We need reform before we just throw money at the same situation, because guess what? 3 years from now, they'll be back and say, now we need another $1,000.
Yeah.
And that's impossible.
Well, I think your cultural thing is apropos, and I think Ben Carpenter in the chat room nails it. He says parents in non-charter schools are allowed to wash their hands of the responsibility to educate their children. We have a culture problem that requires more parental involvement to solve. The school districts should promote parental responsibility for the outcome of schools. And I agree with that. And that's actually statistically provable. You could see that the ultimate parent-teacher ratio is 1-to-1 when you're homeschooling your kids, and they are ultimately involved in their kids' education. That's why homeschoolers statistically and historically have always outperformed brick and mortar. It's another reason why charters do so well, because of all the direct parental involvement and care that's taken. You could see that the more parental involvement leads to that. All right, David, we're out of time. Go ahead, and I just went over the top of the hour, so go ahead and give me your final thoughts here.
But the interesting part is the education industry in Alaska wants to reinvent the wheel. They don't want to take the wheel that's currently working. Like you said, charter schools, homeschoolers. You look at House Bill 69, and it attacks both of those types of schools. Charter schools are going to have an 8% administrative overhead instead of 4%. Correspondence students all are going to have to mandate the state standardized test, the Alaska Star, if they want to get funded for their particular student. So it's really interesting what's going on. They're taking the best parts of the education system we have and trying to dismantle them and force the kids, chain them to a desk in a brick and mortar school.
This is all about money and control. That's what it's about. It's about money and control. The unions don't want to lose their thing. That's why they fought against the consolidation of the healthcare, right? The consolidating the healthcare was going to save what, $54 million or something. I mean, it was a huge amount of money, and some districts were interested in it, but the union said no. Why? Because they would lose control of that money, and they would lose control of managing those funds.
A few years ago, there was a bill, I don't know who put it in, I think it was like 5 years ago, to do exactly that, allow the school districts to participate in the Alaska Cares state healthcare plan. 4 of the 5 large school districts supported that effort. Only the elephant in the room, the Anchorage School District, oppose that. And that shows the power of the teachers union.
Absolutely. David Boyle, final thoughts before I let you go.
Well, I'm out of my Prozac right now, so and I have a suggestion for you, Michael. You might want to take your headphones off to let some of that steam out.
Yeah, I don't want my head. I don't want my head to explode.
But the final thought is, when you have a fiscal crisis like we're going to, it's not bad this year. In the next two years or so, or I think they're going to be really bad. That makes change happen. It puts the pressure on the current system.
We can only hope. We can only hope that somebody does some self-analysis and says, maybe what we're doing isn't right. Maybe it's not the best way to do it. Maybe we should look at that. I'd love to see it. Yeah. David Boyle, thank you so much for coming on board. Thanks for being patient this morning and allowing us to take some of your time. I appreciate that. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you much, Michael.
Appreciate it. All right, folks, that does it for us today. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you then. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.